Hello and welcome to the show. Jelly cars have been a staple of FailRace since all the way back in Forza 4. The premise for such vehicles is incredibly simple. They are designed to fall over through cornering, not through hitting curbs hard, not through doing anything stupid as a driver, but simply through going around a turn. And this doesn't have to be at high speed either, 20, 30 miles an hour, and these vehicles will fall over. A combination of very big tyres, very, very high grip, a high centre of mass, and very soft suspension will cause these vehicles to do strange things. The other important aspect of all this is not only does the truck or car have to be able to roll over, but when it isn't going around a corner, it still has to be somewhat drivable. Now, Forza 4 had the perfect physics engine, if you like, for these jelly cars. In later Forza games and on Forza 7 here, we have to do this in the rain. For whatever reason, in the dry, there is this magical Forza force that stops cars from falling over. But in the rain, it isn't there. Now, this does make it a little bit more difficult to get enough grip in the trucks to essentially get them to grip roll. But as you can quite clearly see with this Hilux, it does still work. It does still work very well indeed. Now, the drivability is actually one of the biggest challenges with these kind of vehicles. To try and get them to be able to drive normally in between the going on two wheels around a turn is somewhat difficult. The trucks have to be so incredibly soft that they are prone to bouncing around a lot. An awful lot of bouncing around, because it likes to sort of wheelie or tripod its way out of a corner, under brakes, the nose dives, the back end sometimes comes off the ground, sometimes will just bunny hop into corners. However, on the most part, it isn't too terrible in terms of drivability, and it will roll at very, very low speeds. While this is, the camera can't quite figure out where the truck's the truck's still at the top of the course. Replay camera. I've just about managed to recover it. There it is, working again. Yeah, this will roll over at 20 miles an hour. No problem. It's not quite, I don't think, as slow a speed as we got the Delta S4 to roll. It's about 11 miles an hour the Delta went over. But this will go very, very, very slowly, and it will still have enough grip to kind of topple its way over. It's an interesting drive, that much is for sure. So naturally, we were going to have to go racing with these, but not just a straight up race. You see, to add that additional level of challenge, a 4-lap race at Suzuka here. However, when you roll, you are out. It is last man standing, or whoever completes the 4 laps first. So there is a real risk versus reward kind of a challenge going on here. Somebody didn't last till the till the exit of turn 2. Huge roll for the green truck. He actually got it on 2 wheels, ended up cutting across the nose of vehicles on his inside. They kind of helped him over. There's a red truck doing a long 2-wheel moment on the exit there. One of the black trucks had got exploring. I found myself up into the lead. These S's are lethal because it's a relatively long corners. You're turning for such a huge amount of time. At some point through the corner, the truck wants to get up onto 2 wheels, and all 3 of us at the front were doing different things. The black truck in third goes for not quite a full tumble, slides. If you slid, as long as you didn't have your roof touch the ground, then you were okay. For it to count it as a roll, you had to have gone onto your roof. So if you slid along the door and managed to recover it, then you were good. The camo truck in the background gets a big 2-wheeled moment as the monster truck that we are following here then has to panic and bail out of the second of the Degners, and that's what you have to do with these trucks to stop them rolling. If it starts going over, you've got to counter steer as quick as possible, and if that means carting it out towards the wall, that is what you go and do, because you've got to react very quickly. You see the black truck here also getting into issues at the Degner. Now, us 2 at the front, we're actually starting to pull a bit of a gap back to the rest of these vehicles, as third place would head into the hairpin with a little bit too much speed. Almost catches it the first time, but it is a painfully slow roll for that silver and orange truck. Incredibly slow. Weird, it kind of took 2 bites at going over, which is, yeah, an odd thing for a vehicle to do, as everybody else is tippy-toeing their way around the hairpin, not sure how much speed they can get away with. The white truck, no, that's not, that's a bit too much speed. As I say a bit too much speed, it's actually too much steering. It's the steering lock that is the issue. Holding steering lock for any length of time that goes over, not the speed. These trucks will do 160 miles an hour. They've got 1,000 horsepower in them. They'll do that speed, fine, but it's the turning, as the camo truck would find out. Still on the opening lap here. Yeah, it's that little bit too much turning. What the camo truck found is he was kind of trying to do minimum amount of steering input, realised he was going out towards the grass, panicked, just put on that little bit too much steering, and at the speed you're going at that particular section of the track, you're just going to flip the truck. We were still actually having a wheel-to-wheel-ish kind of fight at the front of this field as we were heading through Spoon on the opening lap. I was the pathfinder here. I was not looking forward to heading up towards 130R. Notoriously fast, notoriously scary corner. As I said, these trucks accelerate like crazy. All-wheel drive, huge tyres, massive amounts of power. They go very, very quickly, but trying to get them slowed down again is always a bit of a lottery. If you do the slightest bit of steering input or you get slightly something wrong, they'll wiggle, and as soon as they start wiggling, you're in a world of trouble. You can see the truck behind me as we head into the chicane here, the way that it kind of moves around under braking. I'm getting a little bit onto two wheels out of the chicane. Around the final corner, I have big problems trying to get on the power. Again, it's minimum amount of steering input you can get away with, but still needing to stay on the track. And I didn't have the best of exits out of that final corner. We're going side by side. It's a drag race now down towards turn one. I really don't want to be stuck on the outside here, but neither of us quite know where the best braking point is. In the end, it's a pretty damn good overtake and a fairly clean piece of racing from both of us in 1,000 horsepower trucks that constantly want to murder us when we go round a corner. You can see my vehicle bobbing and weaving around. We also found out it's a hell of a lot easier to follow. It's a hell of a lot easier to not be the Pathfinder vehicle. You can just kind of gauge on what the vehicle ahead is doing as to how much speed you need to take through the corner. So yeah, it's definitely big advantageous to be in the kind of second position or behind vehicles. Someone managed to miss the braking point completely for the chicane. Don't quite know what went on with them. The purple vehicle that we are following here with the camera got things wrong around the final corner. It saved the initial one. Knew he had to try and get the vehicle or keep the vehicle on the track, but in the end, once more, it's that too much steering lock heading around there at too high a speed, and sure enough, the Hilux is going to go for a pretty big tumble. I ended up with myself back in the lead. The pink truck made a small mistake somewhere, kind of bobbled himself off the circuit. That put me back up ahead. I get a huge, it's kind of a huge three-wheeled moment that starts shaking my truck around. I'm on the brakes, trying desperately. I know what's going to happen across the grass. Somehow, we managed to not end up spearing each other off into the gravel trap through there. The pink truck's out wide, is playing in a different sand trap. Not my fault that time around. In all of our squabbling and us getting each other into trouble, it was now becoming a three-truck battle for the lead. And this is kind of a danger area, having like racing wheel to wheel in trucks like this makes it too tempting to try and put the power down, as I find on the exit of the hairpin. I catch it before we go over, but that big two-wheeled moment is going to cost me a lot of time. And the black truck finds himself having moved up a couple of positions in almost as many corners. Now we can start to see the well, littering of Hiluxes around the circuit, and it's always scary. Both of us on two wheels. I have a huge bunny hop from my truck, desperately trying to slow it down as we head into Spoon once more, going side by side. We're in a 1,000 horsepower jelly truck, so we're going too wide into Spoon when things go wrong for me on that tighter inside line. Again, too much steering lock and I tumble over. I get away with it because it's at such a low speed and I catch it quick enough so that we only scrape along the door. And that does only drop me back to third place. We were a long way clear of the rest of the field. However, in my haste to try and catch up to the vehicles ahead, carry too much speed into 130R. You can see the back of the truck wiggling around under braking, and it's just too much speed through 130R. I fall over again. This time, unfortunately, in my attempts to recover the truck, I end up going the wrong way, and, well, that was me out. A bit unfortunate for me, not able to quite recover the truck in the way that I wanted to, but yeah, I was done for. I wasn't the only one having big issues trying to slow the trucks down into 130, because we were very, very cautious the first lap. We knew we could take more speed in the second lap, but then everyone goes in a little bit too hot on the second lap, as these two would still be skating under brakes into the chicane. The pink truck would then get himself into trouble. It's an even more impressive, I think, two-wheel moment with a black truck. That's so far on its side to have not gone over. So pink truck was down and out in the background, which leaves this Juggernaut vehicle quite a long way out in front. He actually had a really, really big lead at this stage. However, when it's a matter of, well, potentially last man standing, you've got to make sure you don't roll the truck, and coming into spoon, that is a little bit too much speed, a little bit too much steering lock, and very little warning. Sometimes you've got a bit of, that bit of time to try and catch your vehicle. Other times it would just snap and go, and in that case, yeah, that was him out. By the time, this was towards the end of lap number 3, as the truck in, I think, 3rd place now, there were 4 vehicles going. 4 vehicles had made it. This one only just getting stopped for 130R. See, doing a bit of a wheelie as he tries to get some power down. Yeah, 4. However, those that were still going were being quite cautious. There was a fair gap between all 4 of them around the circuit, and even with being cautious, you can get your truck into a lot of trouble. Having had a big moment through 130R is a big moment out of the chicane and around the final corner, but being smooth enough on that steering. This black Hilux was up in 2nd place, actually the one that went skating through turn 1, and the one that fell over onto its side on the opening lap would keep going. He had a huge moment at the second of the Enigmas, again, caught it in time. One of the things that's quite difficult is when you are up onto 2 wheels, the instinct, of course, is to try and counter-steer it, but the instinct is to stop the truck from going off the road, and that's kind of what I did at 130R, is I could see I was going towards the gravel trap, and I was too eager to stop my truck from ending up out there, whereas if your truck's going, you really need to just throw it at a wall or onto the gravel, and you're fine. At the front, it would be this blue and white truck with a little bit of an interesting line around the final chicane that would go on to take a victory. Again, a fairly large margin of victory with only 4 of them. Nobody fell over on the final lap. Only 4 of them would make it to the finish. It had certainly been a challenging race. Unfortunately, well, I say unfortunately, the replay cut off right at the very end of that one, so I didn't get to show the other trucks crossing the line. Our next race, we would head to Nürburgring. The full Nordschleife, 1 lap is all we had to do, as one of the red Hiluxes stalls off the line. 1 lap around the Nordschleife. There was a certain expectation that nobody would make it. We were kind of quite prepared for this to very much be a last man standing scenario. We did do this with Delta S4s, and a few of the Deltas on Forza 6, and a few of the Deltas did make it, but these are faster than the Deltas, a bit more difficult to control, and quite on the wobbly side. We were, after only having 4 vehicles finish at Suzuka, we were expecting to see a higher rate of attrition here. However, unlike Suzuka, where we'd already lost 1 truck by the time we got out of turn 2, the opening section of this particular race was going a lot smoother. Everyone was being that little bit more cautious. Now, Nürburgring is not the easiest place to get overtakes done, certainly through this opening section. It is very, very narrow, especially when you're in trucks that want to wobble and fall over. The white and green Hilux is to the inside, although it has to try, or will end up around the outside, having to go the long way as we head down this back straight. Can't quite get that pass completed. One of the big challenges, early challenges in this circuit is the jump. Now, this will send high-powered race cars and so on flying. The Hiluxes were quick enough to get some big air time if you were taking too much speed. The green truck off into the wall. Now, while you're going to lose a heap of positions and a load of time, it wasn't a roll. So while, yeah, you're out wide of the circuit, you haven't ended up on your roof, so you aren't out of the race, just kind of dumped down the order. In fact, it did take a good few more corners before anybody would go over. This black truck that came second at the Suzuka race was leading the way way faster than I was going around here. I just wasn't brave enough to take the speeds he was doing. However, those speeds come at a potential cost. And sure enough, he would be the first to go over at the top of the hill. It is a tough part of the circuit, and just, yeah, too much speed over the crests. Of course, the elevation changes and the kind of cambers on the road and so on can throw vehicles off, and that's it's a nasty corner. It was always going to be one of those danger corners. I was a little bit more cautious. It paid off for me. Further back, again, we were going to see more vehicles caught out. These fast sections bouncing the trucks around no end. The pink truck has a huge bounce, but it's a vehicle up ahead that ends up going over and tumbling and spiralling out of control through there. Amazingly, nobody hit that truck as it was flying across the track in such a manner, but everybody would, make it through that section. still, there are constant dangers. There are constant dangers around Nürburgring from the high speed. The high speed sections are bad for the trucks bouncing around and you losing control. The low speed sections are bad for sort of holding steering lock for a long period of time and having the vehicles roll over at 20 miles an hour. And you're still trying to find speed. You're still trying to judge how fast you can go, because these things will pick up some serious speed when you do get them out of a corner, and because you're racing other people with that level of power, you've got to try and go for it. But all it takes is a bit too much steering lock on the way to the corner. The Kello truck would go for one of the most spectacular tumbles we would see, spiraling his way across the track. Now, again, the field was spread out relatively well, and in some ways that helped. When there was a huge crash from one of these trucks, it would mean that they didn't collect too many vehicles on them. I continued to lead the way in this race. I was being a bit cautious. At one point I had a fairly sizable lead, but I'd seen what had happened to the vehicle ahead of me and was opting for an element of caution. No good having a 4,000 foot lead if you go and roll it with a couple of corners to go. So I was playing it relatively safe, but relatively safe is nothing really for these trucks, because they will go over at any moment's notice. The vehicles would start to tumble. It was kind of about a third of the way through the lap when we started seeing more and more vehicles going over. We kind of got through the early stages, people got a little bit more confidence, and that's when it got dangerous. The monster truck just a little bit too much speed. I think he was sort of saw himself starting to go towards the grass, tries to steer the truck away from the grass, and in doing that, that's too much steering lock, and sure enough, it's unspectacular tumble, but it will go over. I think one of my favourite rolls goes to this yellow truck. Both vehicles in this part get carried away on the brakes, like the back end's wiggling around. They just can't get the vehicles slowed down. This truck has a really unfortunate one. As he's slowing for a corner, the rear wheel catches on the grass on the painted line. He spins the truck. Incredibly slow speed roll. A really peculiar one, but it went over. The green truck did very well to avoid it. The purple truck slows down as there is a vehicle in the middle of the road. Yeah, that's perhaps one of the most bizarre rolls there is. It might have been a puddle as well on the outside there, but it will cause trouble for these sort of vehicles. My lead was now pretty much non-existent. Through the high-speed sections, I hadn't been as brave as the pink truck and found myself in kind of, again, once more, a wheel-to-wheel battle for the lead in these utterly ridiculous vehicles. I'm out wide across the curb. The carousel, we didn't really know what to expect whatsoever from these. I'm on the inside, and I'm happy to take the normal line. The other truck having to be forced onto the top, although the excess camber down low was one we didn't quite know how it was going to react with the trucks. I had to have a wobble on the exit, but on the most part, we were around there relatively well. As I said, Nürburgring is difficult to pass, even if you are considerably faster. It does help, and the most likely way you'll get passes done is when the vehicle ahead of you makes a little mistake. I ended up out wide across the artificial grass, and that's going to cost me a position. But again, I'll take losing that position over throwing the truck into a corner a little too fast and tumbling over. There were some other interesting wheel-to-wheel fights. This grey and orange truck would be leading this little group. I think this was the group for third at this particular moment in time, trying to fit maybe two trucks wide through some very, very fast corners. The white Hilux having a look around the outside is a big two-wheeled moment from the silver car. The vehicle on the outside just can't. I think he's trying to, again, put in that minimum amount of steering lock, but in this section where it's so fast, that can often cart you towards the wall. Too much speed from the orange truck, and sure enough, that will go over. Doesn't quite go out at this point. It's another very weird roll, that one. I think it's as the track fell away at the vehicle, because that was a real sudden, everything was going fine, and then sudden snap and went over. Yeah, it's will get going again, although it didn't last too much longer until he would tumble out. The white truck was continuing to battle with big two-wheeled moments. There were quite a few visits to the fence. As you can imagine, around here, with the speed that these trucks could get up to and the amount that they could just suddenly start bouncing around, it was often quite difficult to keep them out of the walls. You could get away without, flipping the trucks over, but yeah, sometimes the odd bounce off of the wall. The white truck was out a little bit wide, doesn't quite get on the power soon enough. and that would be a loss of position. But again, there was a lot of survival aspects in this. There was a lot of times where vehicles were quite happy to sometimes even let another car go past to follow it, so that they could see where the limits were of grip, see what they could and couldn't be getting away with, because yeah, there's a lot of exploration almost around here, with no one really knowing what might happen and where, you know, all it takes is a little crest in the road to upset these vehicles. Like in a race car, they might get a bit upset. In these, they do that. In these, when that little crest gets, well, catches you off guard, it will just throw you around. I'm not quite sure how I kept that one under control, but that would happen to you regularly around this circuit. And we were having an interesting little, almost tug-of-war battle at the front. It turned out that A, it was much easier to follow another truck, and B, I was much better through the slow sections. The truck ahead of me had been much quicker through the faster sections, but as it got to this more technical part of the lap, kind of towards the end, the final quarter of the lap almost, this is where I was doing better. I was keeping pace and putting the vehicle ahead under a little bit of pressure, and sort of I would make a little mistake, get bounced around, he would make a little mistake, and then I'd catch up, and it was, yeah, an interesting sort of battle. I've got wheels on the grass, definitely not where you want to be. The white and red truck, there's still the fight over that third position. Hadn't dropped too far back, but the downside of being the sort of second truck is if you are trying to push that little bit too hard to keep up. Catches the initial big two wheels moment, but it's the second one around the next corner that would see the white vehicle. Well, yeah, that's another one. That's another one out of the race. So easy to do. So easy to do, and often so little warning. At the front, it would be the pink truck that would go on to take a victory here. I would have a big scrape along the side on my mirror that would drop me down into, well, I say drop me down into second place. It would keep me in second place. Third, kind of caught up to my rear bumper, but couldn't do anything about getting past. The replay, again, screwed up on this one. I don't quite know why it was, but the replay, I mean, we get to just to the very end, the final chicane, and the replay gives up. So, yeah, can't quite see the truck cross the line, but he did make it without rolling. In fact, 5 of us would make it this time. In 4th place, it would be this purple Hilux. 3rd would go to the blue and white truck that won the opening race. Yeah, this purple Hilux was a fair way back, had a couple of I think a couple of spins early on, but would make it all the way around. And a lot of the trucks further back that, you know, had lost a lot of time early on were happy to go for the slower and steadier route just to make it to the finish, because us at the front were pushing each other relatively hard, and, you know, we could well fall over. This red truck also would make it in a 5th place. We got one more vehicle to the finish at a much longer, a much tougher circuit. We did get 5 Hiluxes around here. There were also a big number of spectacular crashes, as you would expect. I'm kind of surprised. I was expecting to see more vehicles potentially go out. Some were really quite cruising around towards the end just to try and keep it alive for long enough, but it worked. You know, it got them to the finish. In the end, it wasn't quite enough to win the race, but had us at the front had mistakes, tumbled over, then yeah, it was a solid strategy. The Jelly Hiluxes were as entertaining as you would expect them to be. Some really rather impressive crashes, but I think everyone did a good job trying to keep these things under control, especially when racing wheel to wheel. A big thank you to Please Don't Eat Me for the tune on these, and I hope, Toyota, that this is the sort of thing you were wanting us to do with your vehicles when you restrict us to what we can use, what you will put into games. I hope you approve of the jellified Hiluxes. That, though, is going to be it for this video. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.